right, and this is September 21st of 2021, and this is the September meeting of the Palm Springs Sustainability Commission. And I will turn it over to Roy Clark to get us started.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order the September 21st meeting of the Palm Springs Sustainability Commission. Stacy, will you please take the roll call? Tracy. Sorry.
Commissioner Evans.
Present.
Commissioner Gauthier.
Present.
Vice Chair Friedman.
Present.
Commissioner Flanagan. That's Jim.
Present, yeah, here, got it.
Commissioner Ocanias.
Present.
Commissioner Baker.
Here.
Commissioner Futterman.
Present.
Commissioner Torrance.
He's absent tonight.
This is an excused absence. Commissioner Barrett
Present.
and Commissioner Garrett. Oh, I'm sorry, Chair Clark.
Present. So I'd like to welcome everybody to the meeting tonight. We have a pretty long agenda, and we have a special presentation this evening as well. If there are visitors, there'll be time for public comments later in the meeting. And I'd ask that commissioners, please keep your microphones muted during the meeting and then raise your hand to be called to speak, and then unmute your microphones. And if you raise your hand and you're not recognized, then speak up anyway, because it's sometimes hard to see everybody who wants to speak. So the next item on the agenda is the acceptance of the agenda. And it was emailed and posted on Thursday, September 16th. Are there any comments about the agenda? Hearing no comments or objections, the agenda is accepted. And then we'll move on to staff comments with Patrick. And he has listed his comments in an attachment to the agenda packet.
Right. Thanks, Roy. So I have only a couple of quick updates to that agenda, and I'm sorry, the sun's about to go down over the mountain and I'll look a little less weird in a minute. But I wanted to mention a little bit more of an update on the airport demonstration garden. The bid for the contract to install the garden has been issued, and we expect responses back on October 14th. And at that time, we will have a better sense of timing. We were a little bit delayed in getting it out over the summer. We had hoped to get it out in July or August, but we may be running into some timing issues based on how they plan to remove the turf. So we're waiting to see what the responses are to the solicitation to get a better understanding of timing of the installation. And so assuming that they can go forward this winter / early spring, we should be okay. But if the date pushes back past, I think, February, then we get into some challenges with regard to planting in and having it heat up for the summer. So we're going to monitor that as soon as we get the responses back to see what the timing is that people think when they think that people can have stuff planted. So I'll keep you guys posted on that. I'll update you at the next commission meeting on the status. I'm also going to talk to the airport commission tomorrow just to give them an update as well. So that was one thing. And then the other thing I just want to mention, we had a lot of, I included a lot of dates for the upcoming council meeting agenda items, just to give you a sense of all the stuff that's coming forward to council over the next few months. It's a lot. And so it's good to just kind of have all that stuff on our radar. So we'll be working through that list as we go forward here. The next one, of course, is on the 30th, when we talk about the scope of the new franchise with Palm Springs disposal, or rather the updates to that franchise based on SB 1383. So that's all the comments I have for now.
Thank you, Patrick. The next item is public comments. Is there any?
Chair Clark, I had just one question for Patrick.
Sure.
Patrick, can you give a little bit more detail on October 28th purchasing policy?
Yeah, so as part of SB 1383, we are required to update our environmentally preferable purchasing policy. And that has been primarily focused on purchases of like paper and things like that. SB 1383 requires us to include purchases of reclaimed organic materials such as mulch and compost. So we have to include provisions for that in our policy, and it's also just a good time to update that policy to include things that have been kind of heretofore unwritten. For example, the prohibition on the use of Roundup is one thing we want to include in there. The purchasing of recycled paper, making that a stronger requirement. So those are the kinds of things that will be included in that.
Okay, and these are all city purchasing policies. just to
Yeah, this is for the
clarify.
city. Yep.
Are there any other questions for Patrick before we move on? Okay, so the next item is public comments. I don't believe that there are any visitors here with public comments. So we'll move on to presentations. And I'd like to introduce Andreas Kneist. He's here to speak to us tonight. Andreas was educated in Berlin and Victoria, British Columbia. He's worked in financial management over the years and is focused on global alliances. In March of this year, he became the co-founder of Motorcycle Offsetters, which he will speak about tonight. Andreas lives in Victoria, British Columbia, and he also has a home in Yucca Valley. He's interested in sustainability issues in Palm Springs and the Coachella Valley, and he's an avid motorcycle rider. So with that, I'll turn it over to Andreas, and I believe, can you show the slides, Patrick?
I think Andreas is going to do that, so he should.
Yes, I can certainly do that. Let me just see whether that works. Can you see this?
Yep, it's coming up.
Okay, that's great. Okay, can I get going?
Yes.
Yeah, feel free.
Okay, so yeah, thank you very much for having me. My name is Andreas Kneist. I'm aware that I was given only 10 minutes, so when I hush through the slides, then this is not something that I want to do, rather the opposite. But I'm also very much aware of the fact that I have been kindly invited to this meeting, and I don't want to obviously outstay my welcome. So in the interest of time, I immediately jump in and tell you a little bit about what I have in mind. I hope you've had a chance to scan through the slides in preparation to this, and even more so, possibly even had a look on our website and watched one of the YouTube videos that was available. It helps a little bit for the background. If not, then I'll try my best to make up ground now. So what I would like to speak to in the very few minutes is give you like a sentence or two with regards to the company, Motorcycle Offsetters itself. Another sentence, it can only be very high level, maybe one step backwards, quickly explaining and refreshing our memories what a carbon offset is. And finally, from slides 6 onwards, 6 to 10, maybe 11, want to present ideas that we think we have come up with that potentially could form a part of the Palm Springs sustainability activities as they are available to the public eye at the moment. So just trying to minimize this. So who we are. We are a new company set up this year, and we're certainly a motorcycle company more than anything else, which is geared towards the global or Western world, global writing communities, asking those communities to not only neutralize their annual CO2 emissions, but go one step further and pay at least another 10% extra to sequester carbon out of the atmosphere. Effectively, the concept is you have emissions of 100, but you pay 110, and effectively you make things better by at least 10% than you have found them before as a motorcycle rider. We call this carbon negative riding. And the other arm of what we do is we provide those riders who have offset their motorcycle emissions we connect these riders with affiliated partners, predominantly motorcycle industry players, if you like, retailers, others, but also, hospitality, restaurants, cafes, hotels we're working on, insurance companies we're working on, for these partners to give discounts to the riders who have offset in the first instance. And because the numbers, the dollar amounts to offset an annual a motorcycle on an annual basis, because those dollar numbers are so small, the riders have a very good chance to actually get their money back, in inverted commas, to recoup the investment that they initially did. We're talking here on an average basis, finger in the air, maybe $25 a year per motorcycle. And then quickly, with regards to who the company is, at the moment, it's myself and my wife. We're both the co-founders. I have had I've been associated with the motorcycle environment in the UK, in Germany, and Canada, in the US significantly over the years, mainly in advanced training programs and event organizations and marketing activity. I have, for the past year and a half, been a board member of the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America. It's a private club of 25,000 members across the States, Canada, and actually even beyond North America. So we feel, and then we have an advisory board as well, very much corporate sustainability emphasis there, consulting, and obviously everybody is a player in the wider motorcycle environment. We have connections to the university here in Victoria, the Royal Roads University, the tourism branch in particular, and this group meets with us and advises us. Carbon offsets. I assume, I hope I don't bore you with this, but literally just wanted to say one sentence to this, just to refresh our memories. Through a carbon offset, you pay somebody else to take the equivalent amount of CO2 out of the atmosphere, which you yourself have emitted in the first instance. In layman's terms, you could say you pay somebody else to clear up after you. And how does this all work? The funds, effectively, if you purchase carbon offsets, those funds go all the way down the supply chain to the project on the ground, the project that either sequesters CO2 out of the atmosphere or reduces CO2 emissions out of the atmosphere, or avoids it in the first instance altogether. The carbon offsets that, the carbon offsets that we work with ourselves are high quality offsets. They are highly regulated and need to meet a lot of significant selection criteria to ultimately be traded on, on markets, on commodity markets, if you like. So it is not the same situation as you would have thought maybe 15, 20 years ago, where it was a little bit the Wild West, and players could sell hot air. It's a highly regulated commodity, not so dissimilar to the financial industry after 2008. I put on this slide only to show you our position in the supply chain, if you like. You see here to the right that we have the project on the ground. We work together with an award-winning leader in the offset world, a company called Carbon Zero. They've been around for a decade and a half, and they deal with all the technical, administrative, regulatory, audit portion of the selecting and sourcing projects, and making sure that the entire system basically is compliant with international standards. And now I start with the section which is very near and dear to my heart, and hopefully I can capture a little bit of your interest with regards to this. So here are our ideas. Here's sort of like what we think could play a part in the Palm Springs strategy and plan as you move along with rolling out your sustainability and action goals. All ideas that I want to present are meant to be integrated into your plans. Nothing should work in parallel or outside, so it's all meant to help accelerate achieving your goals, and really coming up with a little bit more out of the box, innovative thinking about certain things that probably haven't been ever considered, because not many people consider motorcycle riders immediately and connect them with climate change, carbon offsets, and things like this. So in short, we've come up with 4 main points. One is to obviously to promote and the development of Palm Springs as a premier ecotourism destination. The number 2, in my eyes, a super quick win is offsetting the entire Palm Springs vehicle fleet. Number 3 is all about education and engagement with Palm Springs residents, communities, and go beyond Palm Springs. And number 4 is about rejigging the brand or branding of the city of Palm Springs. I use the word leadership here, but ultimately it's all about the brand. It's also about integrating efforts of others, both within the city limits, but also neighboring municipalities and beyond. So I go one step further into the detail now. I start with the first point. And this is now about the ecotourism destination. So what you see here, this roundy thing, is what I would call a carbon offset investment that also works as a stimulus with a circular effect for businesses in Palm Springs. In other words, the money invested does actually not leave town. And what I mean with this is the following. I start here at the top left. We look for ways, for marketing opportunities to attract out-of-town motorcycle riders, and tell them about the program. Tell them what Palm Springs is all about, what this particular program could be all about, and try to entice them to come into town. We get those riders who come into town to collect what we call here simply a green biker pass. That could be an online pickup, but I find it much more elegant if that was, for instance, something that would actually, almost like what the picture here indicates, a little ticket. Something that could be collected from the couple of motorcycle dealerships that we have in town in Palm Springs. It could be motorcycle affiliated retailers. There is a training school in town as well. It could be other retailers, or it could be obviously a city facility. It could be the tourist bureau. And for every recorded pass being handed out, the city would offset that individual rider's annual emission. In what the rider would do, the rider would effectively get the pass, and the pass would incentivize or would enable the rider to make use of discounts, which again, the Palm Springs retailer landscape would provide. Ideally, in my world, those would be green businesses. It could be anything. I'm not the expert here. I would look for, expert help, but I could see that the Palm Springs, green business partnership program is something that may provide an angle to this, and almost recognizing those green businesses even more if they get green motorcycles into their shop, into their restaurants, and so on. Further on, this will obviously have a positive business impact on the local business, the communities as well. But I see this almost as an impact that goes beyond the economic numbers in the balance sheet. Retailers could be further engaged into the sustainability plan. They see the benefit of it, and ultimately, everything that I'm talking about here is have communities and have the individual person see the value of acting towards or against climate change and for climate change activities. And seeing this value is something which is very important to me, and it needs to be tangible. And in this particular case, I just look at the Green Rider Pass, and I could also look into the local business who sees it an advantage, and maybe others join along. I move on. So the next point number 2 from my list was, how about, I called it earlier, quick win. Palm Springs could very quickly and very easily offset the entire Palm Springs Police Department motorcycle fleet. I do not know how many bikes there are. I've heard that the number is very, very low. It could be in the single digits, but I do not know the number. I have assumed if it were 25 motorcycles, it would cost the city of Palm Springs less than $600 annually to do that for 25 bikes. I think it's single digits, so you see that the number could be much, much smaller. It's an exercise that we could do in 10 minutes. I'm not exaggerating, 10 minutes exercise to do this. And it would then, of course, have all the branding opportunities for the city, the leading by example. Nobody else in the world, I don't have the evidence for this, but I'm 99.9% sure nobody else in the world does this for their municipal police motorcycle fleet. It would certainly be a pilot. Point 3 that I mentioned is all about engagement. It's about innovation. It's about changing long-term behavioral patterns. And I just wanted to throw a few things out. Last month, I spoke in preparation of this meeting. I spoke to the DMV in California and asked them how many motorcycles are actually in Palm Springs. It's not that easy to find out, but they gave me the number. As of last month, it was 811 registered motorcycles in Palm Springs with residents. What about if the city offset them all in one go? It would have an immediate direct impact on the Palm Springs, carbon balance sheet, if you like. What about if any new motorcycle purchases, in particular the 2 motorcycle dealerships that are in town? What about if the dealers were part of the process to offset any new motorcycle purchases? The city could be part of that equation. We could figure out whether the city should still pay for the annual $25, I call it. The dealer could chip in something. The customer needs to be informed about it, no doubt. I see the opportunity here to bring the entire concept of the value also, again, not only to the dealers and the businesses, but again to the end consumer, in this case, the motorcycle rider. Next point, What about giving Palm Springs resident riders access to the aforementioned Green Rider Pass, to incentivize them to eat out locally, go to the restaurant locally? You know, everybody likes a little freebie, and if it's just, you know, $5 off your dinner bill, it does get people off the couch and go into town. And again, and the final point is obviously free motorcycle parking, and I don't need to explain that. But again, you see my way of thinking. How can a value to the offset and being part of the movement, how can that be manifested? What can we do? And any rider who is aware of the fact that the city offsets his or her bike and gets this access to the free pass, sees there's a value to this, and maybe they're encouraged to do something themselves, maybe for year two. I'm coming to the end. I know I exceed my time a little bit. I call this slide leadership and collaboration, but really what I want to do is, it's a bit of a summary. I've tried to piece together here some of the big ticket items that I sort of like have found in the Palm Springs sustainability plan, the goals, the other, you know, big words that are out there, and connect them with more tactical action steps, if you like. Pretty much the reflection of the last 3 or 4 slides. And of course, you know, leadership, I translate this into strategy, if you like. Collaboration, I translate this into more the tactical things. So you could possibly see the more, you know, strategic things on the left-hand side of the slide. The tactical stuff, the hands-on stuff is more on the right-hand side. But it's very easy for all of us to now, you know, identify triple bottom line. You know, everything that we do needs to basically consider people. It needs to consider, of course, the business, but it also needs to consider the environment and the planet. Points like this, the fact that everything the city wants to do with regards to sustainability has to be quantifiable. It needs to be auditable. It needs to be explainable. There needs to be a time frame to the ROI, if you like, to the returns. Of course, we want to put things on a innovatively on a broader climate strategy. And if I take these points just as examples, I can, at least in my head, connect that very quickly to already existing things on the ground in Palm Springs. I mentioned earlier the Green Business Partnership Program, but I see retailers and restaurants in town. I see the motorcycle industry there. And of course, from a scalability perspective, I know this is important with all the impact that we would like to make. What happens to our neighbors in the valley, the municipal neighbors, the cathedral cities, the palm deserts of this world? What can we do together with them? Can we connect and get, from a procurement perspective, better deals on offsets, group purchases? What kind of community engagement can we do, individual riders, and so on? I could have probably thrown 3 times as many words onto this spreadsheet, but I hope you get the drift, how much opportunity is in this project. Almost at the end, Roy, in preparation to this meeting, asked me to pull some numbers together. Now, you can very quickly see that this is a small project in relation to the overall annual emissions of CO2 of the city of Palm Springs. But the great benefit in it is very low risk because of this. As a pilot project, you can tweak, you can adjust, you can check the results without running out of pocket too quickly, and just from the visiting rider's perspective and the knock-on effects that I personally see through the community, it is extremely scalable. And I think I tried to rush through this as quickly as I can. I hope I didn't lose you halfway through, but I think this is pretty much where I am at the moment.
Are there any questions for Andreas? Well, thank you very much for your presentation, Andreas. There's a lot of interesting information there that can be applied as we go forward, I believe.
Yeah, we are right now in the process of updating our strategic plan, so this is something we could consider along with that.
Yeah, I think the methodology fits in quite well.
And I have one more. If you were inclined to hear a little bit more, I plan to be in Palm Springs if between the 1st and 8th of October, week after next. And I'd be delighted to, have a more in-depth Q&A, numbers, timeframes, anything else that comes to mind face to face, which may, provide a little bit more. It's not so rushed.
Great. Thank you again, Andreas. So now we'll move on to the next item in the agenda, approval of the meeting minutes. That is the minutes of the July 20th meeting. The minutes were sent out with the agenda packet on the 16th of September. Are there any comments or questions or changes for the minutes?
Hearing none, I move to accept the minutes as they are. This is Carl speaking.
Thank you. Second,
This is Randy. I second.
thank you. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Sounds unanimous. So the minutes of the July 20th meeting have been approved. Thank you. Now we'll move on to old business. And the first item there is the update of the climate action roadmap. Patrick.
All right, thanks, Roy. So I am sharing this document that I sent out over the weekend. I updated the material based on the results of the greenhouse gas inventory update that we did recently. So I think that provides actually some really good additional context for what we're doing here. I also tried to update some of the other references to activities that have been going on and situations that have been happening with regard to climate change, and update a few of the activities that we've done to date as well. So I think the biggest thing is to make sure that people understand what targets we are aiming for in terms of our additional reductions in greenhouse gases in the future. So as you'll see here, the 2020 target that we were aiming for was 495,720 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. But as you look forward, 2030, we need to go to almost half of that, and then cut that even further in 2050. So those are kind of the big picture, high level goals that we are aiming for. And this provided this graph, I think I showed this at one of the previous meetings, just shows you how much we were able to offset or reduce our greenhouse gas emissions in the last year based on participation in desert community energy primarily, but also some of the other activities that have been going on with regard to cleaner fuel standards, as well as increased EV adoption and things like that. So that is kind of where we are right now. And then as you can see, we've got quite a ways to go to meet those other goals. The other thing that I included in here was just a summary of the sectors that make up the greenhouse gas inventory. And so you can see from that transportation is by far our biggest source of emissions. And to a certain extent, there's things that we can do about that. To another extent, because of where we are and the highway that runs through our city at the north end, we have a lot of people coming and going. So again, we can control some of that, but maybe not a lot. And then the residential energy is another area that we can focus our attention on, as well as commercial industrial energy. So, so those sectors, the energy use and transportation, are certainly the biggest contributors for us. But of course, we can also make gains in the area of solid waste by reducing waste to landfill, and also water and wastewater, some efficiencies there. So what I did was updated the kinds of things that we are thinking about in terms of moving forward, including expanding the EV charging network, which should be underway soon, developing more of a walkable city through the walkability plan that we're developing, reinstating some shuttles in town or some public transit services, as well as increasing non-motorized transportation like biking and walking. And then we are continuing to do some analyses with PlaceWorks to identify additional opportunities for transportation related reductions. And so we'll be increasing this list as we go forward with conversations with them. On the residential and commercial building side, we have a number of things that we've done, including Desert Community Energy, giving people access to home energy assessments. I got another call about that this week, but it's certainly a program that we could expand. And then a couple of things that we will talk more about in today's meeting, which is home energy efficiency, and also commercial businesses, especially cannabis businesses, trying to target those larger facilities for energy reductions. Because if you look back at the targets that we have, we can't increase emissions, even though I know that we are going to continue to grow. So we have to be conscious of that moving forward and figuring out ways to offset the emissions from growth in various ways. So that's certainly something that we need to be conscious of and thinking about hard as we move forward. And then other things that we've talked about is addressing emissions from the wastewater treatment plant, as well as implementing the new organics waste management requirements, which could have an impact on our waste numbers to bring those down, but also more importantly on the greenhouse gas emissions that we emit as a result of wasted organic material. And so the other thing I did with this version of the climate action roadmap was to add a section on addressing climate impacts. This is something, again, that PlaceWorks is working on as part of the general plan update. So we'll have more information on climate vulnerabilities. And so we can address those as they identify them. But a couple of examples that have come up so far is one is allowing outdoor workers to start earlier in the summer months. Those are some of our most vulnerable populations, especially with the rising heat. So thinking about ways that we can address the needs that they may have moving forward, and also developing more of a response plan for climate-related events. I've started a conversation with our emergency manager to talk more about the next iteration of our emergency response plan and trying to make sure that we address climate vulnerabilities as well as the traditional things that we might encounter here, like earthquakes. So again, more to follow on that. And we hope to have that information this coming month so that when we present to council at the end of October, some of that information is included. But again, the purpose of this document is really to provide council with some ideas about what we've done and what we plan to do in the area of to address climate change, and get their feedback about other things that they might have in mind or other things that they feel we should be looking into. So anyway, so that's the status of the climate action roadmap. And a couple of people have sent me additional thoughts about things that they think we might want to include in that list. Ultimately, what happens to this is it most likely gets integrated into our strategic planning effort. So that it is codified somewhere so that we can work towards achieving the items that are in here. So it's not a standalone document. Any questions about the climate action roadmap?
I have one, Patrick.
Yep.
So if I have 3 or 4 more future action recommendations, you think it's better to email them to you than to present them here?
Yeah, just go ahead and email them to me. That's fine.
Okay.
If you want to give a teaser, you can share it with folks now.
Oh, I think we missed out on zoning and density changes to gated communities and single family dwellings, shade trees I'd like to see. And then I'm still curious of why we're running the cogen plant. If it's like running a coal power plant outside the city, are we going to shut that down eventually? So kind of curious about that.
Yeah. So shade trees in particular is something that's going to come up when we have our strategic planning conversation. It's a difficult conversation, especially given the drought situation. So I think shade structures are an awesome idea. So shading in general, I think, is a topic that we can really dive into and figure out if there are some creative ways to do that. Doing the shade trees concerns me just a little bit, just because of the drought situation.
Okay, I'll email you my stuff.
Great. Other thoughts?
I had, it's sort of similar to what I'm glad Jim said it about shade trees. We could reduce the number of palm trees and replace them with shade trees,
Right.
or not have as much palm waste, or have something that accumulates dust. A shade tree or similar that accumulates dust and helps make the air better, rather than using palm trees. I know that's a sensitive issue, but I'll come back on that at some other point.
Great. And somebody else, David?
Yeah, really quickly, and Patrick, I'll send you an email. The news even from just yesterday, a few days ago, referring the acknowledgement section to the recent IPCC working group report, which the UN Secretary General declared a code red for humanity.
Yep.
Referring climate impacts to 2021 being the hottest summer in record, and yesterday's White House announcement of all of government effort to protect workers, children, seniors, and at-risk communities for extreme heat, because the feds have literally yesterday, from the president on down, said this is a priority. I'd like to see solar app implementation included in the residential and commercial buildings, because that's a very low-hanging fruit that no cost to the city, and promotes ease of installation of our solar facilities. And then I can work with you. I'd like to see a section on water issues that we do have. So particularly since drought is caused by climate change, we can mention some of the actions the city is taking to reduce water consumption, and things that the residents can do, and businesses and visitors, such as turf for the airport project, and rebates for irrigation audits, and stricter water efficiency requirements for new homes. So I'll put that in an email. Some of that can go in the staff report, and I'll work with you on the staff report for our next committee meeting, or can go in the main plan. But those are my main sort of thoughts.
Great. All right.
Are there any other questions for Patrick? So then we'll move on to the next item under old business, and that's existing home energy sustainability ordinance.
Okay, this is part of the climate action roadmap, and I think the idea that I've worked out with Patrick, I think, is that we would include this proposal in the materials to give some context, in the staff report, to give some context of what's in the climate action roadmap, because what's one of the key drivers here is state policy. In addition to the overall GHG reduction, the state has set a goal of reducing building GHG emissions also 40% by 2030. 2030, and the California Energy Commission has identified energy efficiency as one of the 7 broad building decarbonization strategies. So the Energy Commission, which I'm working very closely with, is really encouraging local governments to focus on energy efficiency for existing residential buildings. And I'll talk a little bit more about the California Energy Code, but this is an area where the Energy Code doesn't really get into, and the state wants to see local governments work on their existing buildings. So the State Codes and Standards Program that advises the Energy Commission has been working with me to develop a proposal to cover our existing home energy sustainability. That ordinance is based on one recently adopted by Chula Vista, and essentially it requires homeowners that pull building permits to carry out energy efficiency upgrades, bringing their homes in line with energy requirements for new homes. So kind of just basically brings you up to code. So I've been working very closely with the consultants with very detailed cost effectiveness data, and the model just shows that these measures would save homeowners money, reduce our community-wide GHG emissions and energy consumption, and then also for extreme heat, they would assist in adapting our older housing stock to extreme heat. And as I mentioned, a lot of the older houses, and mine included before my renovations, simply did not have any insulation. So the proposal that's included in the meeting package is largely based on the materials I presented at the June Commission meeting. The ordinance, if approved by City Council, would also have to be approved by the Energy Commission. And the one key change from what I previously presented was requested by the CEC to comply with the Energy Code. So instead of having a specific number of energy efficiency measures based on the value of your permit, they're weighted under a point system by their energy savings. And I'm working with the consultant to refine the scoring based on a template that they've just released to assist the local governments. So at this point, I'm requesting the Commission to reconfirm that the proposal be submitted to City Council as part of the roadmap, and then for them to provide direction for us to continue work on the proposal, conduct outreach, and then to bring a draft ordinance to Council for consideration. And the Codes and Standards Program has also just released a draft ordinance, and that will be my starting point. So I'll be able to draft it. This is one, Patrick, where I think I probably, with the benefit of the state consultants, can do a lot of the work. And I don't think I need to get a new consultant for this one, because at least for the moment, the state's been giving me a fairly large amount of resources. We hit the kind of good point on the timing, and it's possible that if we do this, we could be the first city to adopt the new standards, and then everybody can follow what we call the Palm Springs model. So this could potentially be, and this will go in the Patrick and the staff report, this could be a really good example of leading by example for the rest of the valley, because the data are exactly the same throughout the Coachella Valley, and then other local jurisdictions. So there's a lot more work to be done. Patrick, the one area where I think I'll need to sit down with you is on the multifamily. Whether that's even worth the effort or not, I have to talk to the consultants to see when they're going to update their data, and just to get more data on that. I can see this definitely. The data are far stronger, at least what I have, for single family, but we can see if we can get in for multifamily based on what the city has, and then the consultants are also working on that. So that's the proposal. I'm happy to answer questions. Don, looks like you've got one. And then
Yes,
Dale?
yeah. Just not a question, just a point. In the mobile home parks, their permitting for remodeling and such goes through Riverside County, not through the city. So it wasn't clear to me how you would gain their attention when they're permitting, when they are making adjustments.
This is, as I think you know, Don, the great conundrum of state law, the difference between Title 24 and Title 25. This is a Title 24 program, which means manufactured homes are governed by Title 25, and that's the state, and this literally does not go there. It's a Title 24 program. So that raises a whole bunch of other issues and what the city could potentially be doing. And I've got some thoughts on that. But the short answer is manufactured homes are governed by Title 25 and not affected by this.
Right, yeah, my main point is to at least acknowledge that.
Yeah, I mean, and that can be reflected in the materials. That's a whole, what to do with Title 25 is a whole sort of separate issue. And I'll address that slightly when I go to talk about DC, because I've been thinking about that.
So Don, so the permits don't go to the city permitting offices, they go directly to Riverside County?
Yes.
Wow, okay.
It's a whole, they're not subject to the energy code. They're not subject to any of the building codes. It's a whole nother universe.
And there's probably 3,000 housing units that are manufactured homes.
Yeah, yeah.
I'll put that in the staff report, Don, but thank you for mentioning that, because I can clarify that this only affects single and multifamily homes.
It'd be nice to, we have a lot of remodeling. It'd be nice if there was some way to at least encourage people, some way to reach out to those that aren't.
Right, giving guidance at least or something, yeah.
And once again, the challenge is, I'm not even sure I have the data for that.
Well, I don't either. So that's
whereas I have good numbers of, if you do this, it will cost you X and you'll save Y. And I have that for single family and soon for multi. Don't have it for manufactured. I wish I did. But okay. I'm going to address that when I get to DC, because I have been thinking about that.
Okay.
Jim, did you?
Oh, first off, thank you, David. I looked through this. You did a lot of work on it. It looks great. And since I used to review these things for a living, I just kind of skimmed some of the numbers. A couple of things you might want to update. I noticed in seeing in the water heater cost, it looks like you're using the incremental cost, which is about $200. Those should be using retrofit costs, so it should be like $2,500. I think we used to use incremental costs for calculating program savings. So you might want to look through some of those and make sure that you're using retrofit costs instead of incremental.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that's tripped us up on some filings that we did in Hawaii is we have a large amount of seasonal occupation homes. I would say about 75% of the folks in my neighborhood are gone all summer long. So you have to readjust the run operation hours and cut them in half for a lot of the homes. So you probably should take that into effect, because it really affects cost effectiveness quite a bit. And then the third thing is the building costs have changed quite a bit in the last couple of years. So things like windows have gone up a bunch. So he might want to make sure that he's got the newest numbers in there. I know redoing all your windows in your house for $9,000 would be kind of hard. So you probably should take a look at those before you finish it up. And that's about it. One other thing I'll point out too is the LED lighting. That's by law, the lighting codes were going to be 100% LED. And then the Trump administration kind of obliterated that. The DOE is meeting next week to kind of hopefully put those back into place. So hopefully LED light bulbs will be mandatory and incandescent light bulbs will be outlawed by hopefully sometime next month. So that may or may continue, but those are my only comments. Otherwise, it looks pretty good. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jim. All the numbers are the ones, unfortunately, I have to use because those are the ones that are provided by the state. So there are numbers for each of climate zone. And so those are the numbers that the state gives you. And because this has to be approved by the state, those are the numbers that I use. The one thing that I would say for why it's $200 for water is that it's not actually a water heater. It's simply insulation around your water heater. So it's not a whole new water heater.
Oh, I thought it was replacing the water heater.
Yeah, you're not. You're actually correct. A heat pump water heater, which is that's an electrification measure. That's $2,500 for a heat pump water heater, but putting some insulation around your water heater, which is what the water efficiency package is $200. So that's basically, and that also includes some low flow faucet things. So that's where that $200 comes from, as opposed to $2,500. I don't think a heat pump water heater standalone would be cost effective in our climate zone. So that's why that's, I think, not directly part of the package.
Yeah, I have a tankless water heater, so that won't apply to me, I guess. But it sounds to me like there's an out for a lot of these things too, if it doesn't make sense or it's not cost effective. So
Yeah. All of this has to be cost effective under the energy code. So these are the numbers that the consultants have spent a lot of time on. And so they kind of give me the input, and that's what the Energy Commission. So we have to present that.
Okay, well, it's not the biggest one then is the occupancy levels. If
Yeah.
there's a lot of
I'm-
unoccupied homes, and I don't know how they can address that, but they might want to look at it.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how we do that. I mean, the cost, it really depends on what people are sort of setting their air conditioner to when they're not around.
Yeah, you do it at a population level and then you adjust the population. So it changes the cost effectiveness is how we do it in utility filings, but I don't know what they're doing. I don't know the guy. I don't know this guy that's done this, so I can't comment. But I'm happy to talk to him if you want to give him my number.
All right, well, I'll discuss this. It's Misty. I think you know Misty.
Yeah, she's
So it's her
reporter.
team. It's her team that I'm working very closely with.
Oh,
She's
I'll
kind
give her, that gives me a good reason to call her up. I haven't chatted with her in a while.
Yeah, so she's the main person. She's my main contact
Oh, good.
for this project.
That makes it nice.
And then I have the consultant with the guy who did Chula Vista, but Misty's kind of running this show for the state.
I'll follow up, give her a ring, the next day or two. She likes billing. She can bill when she talks to me. So, and I'll just send you an email what she says to do.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
That's
you.
fine.
Are there any more questions for David?
Okay, so I think Patrick, I'll update this. I'll work with the consultant, and then we'll have a slightly revised version. I'll check. I'll ping the consultants tomorrow. And also, Jim, I'll raise the question and sort of tell Misty she may expect a call or an email from you to see if they have any workaround for that. I think the answer is no, but I'll let them provide.
Yeah, it's a little tricky, but I'm sure she'll know. She's smart.
Great. All right, so Patrick, I'll tweak this and we'll have it for the committee meeting in 2 weeks.
And David, did you request or suggest that we have a consensus by the commission to move
Yeah,
forward?
I think so. Basically, it was sort of a reconfirm that this is part of the climate action roadmap. I want Patrick and Chair Clark how much you want as a vote, but that's obviously the objective of that. This is part of what's presented to City Council with the request for their direction to give us the green light to proceed with more work.
I don't think we need a vote, but I think if everybody could just nod and say, yes, we agree. You provided a lot of information and it already is there in the roadmap. So we should proceed. Does everybody agree?
All right, thank you for that, and I'll continue working with the consultant on this, and it sort of hits a lot of hot buttons on the roadmap of GHG and climate impact and energy savings, because it's a kind of multi-benefit proposal here.
Okay, thank you. So the next item under old business is the sustainability scholarships and home energy assessment audit status and feedback. Patrick.
So I think Tracy's going to update you guys on what we've received to date. We're off to a little bit of a slow start, but I think that's going to increase as we advertise it more. So Tracy, what do we got?
So just as a reminder, the focus of this round of the scholarships is going to be on the new foodware ordinance, continuing with EV chargers and also compliance with the leaf blower ban. We are attending a chamber event tomorrow evening, the Business Expo and Taste of Palm Springs. So we have prepared packets to give to all of the restaurants and food vendors that are in attendance so they can peruse the materials. And then also we anticipate bringing the consultant on in the next, I'm going to say, Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, but 30 days-ish. And that technical support will really be key to aid in our communications with food vendors and restaurants, because we have a lot of things going on right now. So while we just have the one approved, we have an inquiry. And then as Patrick indicated, there was also a call for a home energy assessment. So the momentum is there. Any questions?
Yeah, the one point, Patrick, that I've raised is, and we need to do a lot more work, but working with Ashley to bolt on water irrigation audits onto the home energy assessment program. That's a lot of work, and I'm still struggling just to do it myself. So it's not a slam dunk, and that can go potentially in the roadmap. But I think the funds are there, to give $100 for that as well. But we have to do a lot of homework to figure out who does this and what you can get. It's not regulated the way the other ones are, like the DOE and similar programs.
Right. And as we've learned, even with the home energy assessments, there's a wide variety of folks that are doing that and different products that they produce. And that was actually the nature of the question that we got with regard to the most recent inquiry. Was he's like, I went to the website and I can't quite figure out who I should hire. And so you have any recommendations? So anyway, so that was clear that we need to be clear about who can provide these services.
Yeah, the challenge is that I think there's only 2 people in the valley that do do at least the home, the folk who do your sort of pre-purchase home assessments, audits, that they're also qualified for this. Other people may say that they do it, but there's not that much regulation.
Right.
That was a concern of mine that I've just been wanting to say all along, that I don't know where to put it, which is the bad experience that so many people have had with home energy assessments, that somehow or other we need to distinguish that we're not the same thing.
Mhm. So I think this could speak to a bigger issue. The city governments in general, I think, are loath to recommend a particular provider. But I think in this kind of a program, it warrants us maybe interviewing a few people if they're interested in participating, and maybe assessing their references or something like that, to maybe put together some sort of a list that is certainly can be added to. It's not necessarily exclusive, but it would provide people with a little bit more comfort, I think, on who they might be hiring. So
We can talk about this. We can add this to the agenda for the committee meeting, and I have some thoughts on that.
cool.
Are there any other questions or comments on the scholarships or energy assessment? Hearing none, then we'll move on to new business. And the first item is clean energy requirements for large commercial businesses. David again.
Okay, yeah, me again. I'll take a deep breath, swig of water.
So David, why don't I give a little context for this one too. I know this is I kept forgetting this is our first meeting in a couple of months. So welcome back, everybody. But one of the things that came up during that hiatus was a topic went forward to the Planning Commission and then through to Council. That was a large expansion of a cannabis facility, and there were concerns about the amount of energy that facility was going to use when operating. And so the Planning Commission couldn't really take action on it because there is no ordinance for them under which that they can kind of take action. So they wanted to do a special meeting on perhaps developing an ordinance that would require cannabis facilities in particular to get clean energy or carbon-free energy. And so this was a topic that the Solar and Green Building Committee had been working on a little bit actually before we took off for COVID. And we had, David had been working on developing a draft ordinance, and it included commercial businesses, I think, as well as cannabis facilities. And so that draft was put forward to the Planning Commission at a meeting at the end of August, September 1st. And they discussed that and sort of punted it back to us to do something with. So David has been working on kind of with our legal folks to update that draft of that ordinance. And so that's what we wanted to run by you tonight and then get your feedback, and then we've been asked to do more outreach with the regulated community, and then bring it back to you all for final approval. So David.
All right,
with that,
thanks for the introduction. And for those of you who were on the commission in early, January 2020, you may recognize this. And for those of you who have joined us since then, this is your first take a look, but it's essentially very strongly based on what I had done almost 2 years ago. So the biggest challenge that I faced in bringing the ordinance back is getting some reliable data on energy and water use by the cannabis industry, and the data that the city environmental impact consultant had been using was outdated. So once again, I called in my chits with the folks at the Energy Commission, and they've been very helpful of providing me data and putting me in contact with their consultant to use the data set that the Energy Commission has used for the cannabis rules and the new energy code that I'll talk about a little bit more. And they're in the slide presentation to the Planning Commission that you have in our agenda packet. So I've given Patrick the contact details of the consultant so we can retain the consultant, prepare a formal report, support the ordinance findings, and calculate potential GHG impact of the cannabis cultivation industry. And based on preliminary indications from the Energy Commission consultant and the city's environmental impact consultant, which has now updated their estimates, the permitted cultivators and those with permits pending would substantially increase GHG emissions if they don't power their operations with renewable energy. And the facility that kind of sort of caused us all to come before Planning Commission and council with their concerns, they would potentially, this one facility would result in a 10% increase in our commercial and industrial GHG. So a lot of potential tonnage out there. So as Patrick mentioned, we're going to hold a stakeholder outreach session later this fall before bringing the ordinance before council. Of the 5 permitted and currently operating cultivators, 3 remain on DC's carbon-free program. 1 opted down to Desert Saver, and then that one opted out, and so who may come back in. So I guess the objective for the stakeholder outreach session is we'll have DC present their carbon-free program, its costs, and I'll also reach out to SCE because they have a 100% renewable energy product, which would be eligible for the ordinance as well. And then I'm going to work with DC and SC to gather data on how many businesses would be required to purchase renewable energy if that part of the draft ordinance is included. That's direction from the Planning Commission. It's in the ordinance. It was in the original ordinance, but we need to find out just how many people are involved and how many are already on carbon free and how many aren't. So we'll see if that part survives based on additional data that I'll have. But for the moment, it's in the proposal. So following stakeholder input, we'll bring it back to the ordinance, the Ordinance Commission for a formal vote, but I'm happy to answer any questions you have about it this evening. Well, overwhelmed you all. I know it's a lot of stuff that I'm throwing at you.
It was dense.
I'm trying to do it quickly, given it's a long meeting. Yeah.
My greatest concern, David, is the extent to which we increase regulations that then drive the businesses out of Palm Springs and send them over to a neighboring city where they pollute more, and that pollutes where they use more energy, and that's total energy usage for the valley. So
I don't have the answer or the solution to that. I do expect that to be raised by the stakeholders, and I guess the best answer is that cities are allowed to regulate cannabis industry under Prop 64, and these could potentially be a huge impact on our GHG emissions. Yes, they would be. They move a mile down the road, they would affect another city's GHG emissions, and that is going to be, you predicted, I think, the very small pushback comment that I expect, and I think we already did get from a very impacted stakeholder here. But I do note the 3 of them are already on, did stay with carbon free. And there was a comment at yesterday's Cannabis Stakeholder Committee meeting where they objected to what the ordinance doesn't require, which is putting solar on your roof, and that's not what the ordinance requires. And they seem, at least this one stakeholder did say that they, supported renewable energy. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's good.
And John, in reaction to that too, I think when prices are driven up for electricity, I think there's been a serious trend to switch to outdoor growing. And in most cannabis, I think for trim and oil and products are outdoor grow now. So that moves, maybe moving more people. I mean, they're growing a lot of cannabis outdoors in Imperial Valley right now. So I think that's hopefully the trend that we'll see, just eliminating indoor grows altogether.
And Jim, is that feasible here with our weather in the summer?
No, they wouldn't grow in Palm Springs. They grow in Colorado. I mean, there's no reason to grow in Palm Springs. They can grow 1 or 2 growing cycles, but they can't grow during the summer.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it would move cannabis growing out of Palm Springs, but is it appropriate here to begin with? It's a question.
Right.
Yep.
And David, and again, I don't want to get bogged down into the details, but we also talked about the potential, or they asked about the potential of renewable energy credits as sort of offsetting energy use. And there are some complications to that in terms of the types of credits that people would be able to buy that would be basically qualifying. And so, anyway, so that's something else we need to at least mention, but it doesn't sound like it may be something that is very feasible for us.
Maybe this one operator is so big that they could, hire the consultants, and the city would hire its own consultants. But it's the easiest thing is to simply say, call DC or SCE and have them do all of this for you. And literally it affects your electric bill, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing you have to do is pay more money pay more money on your electric bill, but then you don't have to worry about, energy prices and things like that. So we'll see.
Are there any more questions for David?
So Patrick, I'll work with you, and then we'll and Veronica, and we'll try to schedule these stakeholder input sessions in the next month or so, and have materials for them.
Right.
Thank you, David.
All right.
Then the next item under new business is the October 5th special meeting. Patrick?
Actually, just one more thing on that topic. David, I'm going to send you an EIR report from another facility that has applied for expansion. And I'd like to get your observations on what they said, because I found it interesting. So I'll send it to you to take a look at too.
All right, I'll look at it later this evening or tomorrow when you send it to me, and then send back my comments.
Okay.
Thanks.
So with regard to the October 5th meeting, so as we talked about before, a lot by email, I think, we are planning to have a meeting dedicated to strategic planning discussion, and that is going to be on October 5th. And I wanted to just preview for you a couple of things that you're going to be seeing. And for that meeting, we're going to be looking to all of you to review the materials before you get there, be ready to talk about things that you think might be missing, things you want to make sure get incorporated, new ideas that you may have that may not be in some of the current planning documents. So I think there's going to be, we'll figure out how to structure that conversation, but we want to make sure that we have everybody engaged with that as we go through that process. And so there are really going to be 2 parts to that conversation. And I'm going to share a couple of things with you. So the first part of that conversation, we're going to be providing you with a spreadsheet that has in it all of the actions that were identified in the current strategic planning document. And what we have done as the planning subcommittee, Roy and David and Randy and I, have gone through the various pieces of or the various elements of the document and identified the actions which have not been started, some of the things that are ongoing, things that could be referred or deferred to others to do, and what we think should happen to some of these things. Like a lot of actions make sense to continue. Some of them may not make any sense anymore. They've been overtaken by other events. So basically what we have done as the committee is, based on our analysis and review of those actions that were in the strategic planning document, we put together a new document, or we will be putting together a new document that includes an analysis of what was, and then some ideas for ideas and objectives and actions to move forward with. So as you can see, this is the one for solid waste. The name for that one was solid waste and recycling. There were 24 actions and 3 objectives. It'll give a little sense of where we are right now. We're going to actually calculate, give an estimate for our diversion rate. We did a quick calculation. It was about 50%, and we're supposed to be closer to 90%. So again, we need to get working on that. And so this topic in particular remains a really high priority, and several of the actions under this one will probably be retained, but there are also some new ones, like for example, the implementation of SB 1383 is a new one that relates to some of those old objectives, but really is a new one in and of itself. And so anyway, so we'll try to identify those things that are new, that you might not have seen before, but and those things that will kind of carry forward and maybe get a little update or refresh to them. So really what we'd like to do is kind of go into that conversation really informed, so that we can dive right into those things that we think are still missing, those things that we want to get rid of, that kind of thing. So we'll have more instruction for you as we further develop this document, but look forward to seeing that in the next week or so, so that you can get prepared for that meeting on October 5th. So that's really part one. And that may just be a start to this conversation, quite honestly, because there were a lot of things that were in that sustainability plan, probably too much. And so one of our objectives here is to narrow down the types of actions or the number of actions that we are focused on here in the next 5 years. So that is, again, that's the first part of the meeting. And again, it may be just the initial part of that conversation. I expect that that conversation will continue, and we'll continue to refine that information as we go forward. So then the other part is, where'd it go? There it is this one. So the council has asked each of the commissions and committees to develop a list of priorities for them to consider as citywide priorities. So what each of the commissions is doing is they're providing a little summary about who they are and what they've done. But really the key element here is to identify a couple of items that we would want to put forward to City Council to say, these are the most important things that we see in the next year that you, Council, need to help us focus on. So again, I think that this is a very short list. They've asked for 2. I think we may have 3, but certainly no more than that. The other thing to consider here is we want to also have a little conversation around organizational needs and also process improvement. So for example, if there are things that we think we need as a city to help advance these priorities or to address kind of structural issues that we encounter, then we should note those here. And also process improvement. So for example, we had talked before about whether or not we wanted a council member as a liaison or wanted some special subcommittee of the council. So those kinds of recommendations might go here, like if we want a regular meeting with them, et cetera. So that's the other thing we want to identify here as well. So I think the priorities will probably fall out naturally from some of our conversations. And again, since it's just a 1-year time frame that they're looking at, it should be fairly straightforward to figure out what our priorities would look like over the next year. But again, there's opportunities here for us to tell them other things too, like maybe, for instance, things that we don't want to do anymore. Like if there's things that are on our plate that don't seem like they're the best fit, then this is the place to do that too. So anyway, so that's the conversation that'll happen on October 5th. And again, we'll be starting that meeting, I think at 5 o'clock. So it's a little bit earlier than the normal meetings. So anyway, so I just wanted to provide that preview and get you kind of juiced up for that conversation. And again, more information will follow. And I think we're going to have to maybe divide up into maybe some breakouts. We're going to try to do some creative things with that so that we can engage everybody in that conversation. And I'm probably going to ask that each of you take at least one area to really focus on in particular, so that when we get to that, we have some detailed conversation about that topic. So that's all I have for that.
Are there any questions? Thank you, Patrick. I guess I would like to emphasize too the importance of reading through the materials ahead of time, because there's a lot there. The original sustainability plan was very large, and we've done a lot of cutting in some places. So it's important that everybody come in up to speed as far as what we've done so far. Then we can move on from there. So that's the end of new business. And now we'll move on to subcommittee and commissioner reports. And the first one is standing subcommittee on solar and green building.
Okay, try to make this quick. So while not working on all those ordinances that I just presented, I've been busy attending the Energy Commission workshops and the California Climate and Energy Collaborative Forum, where I was one of the presenters on my work on the existing home energy sustainability ordinance, along with the Chula Vista staff member and the consultant who worked on their ordinance. And thanks to Commissioner Barrett for joining us for the presentation. So the big regulatory news is the Energy Commission approved the 2022 Energy Code last month. I included the news release with the committee report. Probably the biggest, this largely affects new buildings, both residential and commercial. Probably the two biggest innovations in the 2022 code are requiring heat pump water heaters. So those will be required for new buildings starting in, for new residential, a single family residential starting in 2023, part of the state GHG reduction. And then for commercial buildings, they're going to have solar and battery storage requirements also in 2023. In the previous code, the current code 2019, solar got added on to residential, and now it's being added on along with some battery storage for commercial. And then also the Energy Commission will approve the Green Building Standards Code next month, and both codes will enter into effect on January 1, 2023, and they'll become part of the Palm Springs Municipal Code via an ordinance the City Council will adopt in late 2022. The Energy Commission held a workshop last Wednesday on its build program, which provides incentives and technical assistance for the adoption of all electric and near zero emission technologies in new low-income residential buildings. New affordable housing projects recently approved by City Council could be eligible for the program, and I've sent the details to Commissioner Baker for the DAP Health Affordable Housing Projects, and to Joy Silver for the Monarch project. That also has been approved by council. So I'll continue to monitor that, but that could be a couple of $1,000s or more per room per unit for those subsidies. The CAC held a workshop this morning on the new round of funding for its electric vehicle incentive program. So Patrick, that could be potentially more money for you. I missed it because it was Sukkot today, so I was attending services, but I've asked to see a recording, and then I'll report back at the October 5 committee meeting. And then literally nothing to report on the legislative front. The legislative session ended on September 10th without any major energy related legislation passing. There was a lot on, that got to the committees, but it just got bottled up in committee, and many of the bills that were held in committee will be reintroduced next year. So I'll continue to follow that, but literally no major action on the energy front on that. That's it for my report.
I have one question, David. How are the energy standards, like in the 2022 requirements, how do they phase with housing development projects like we have in Palm Springs? If the project is ongoing and it has been approved and is ongoing, but maybe building through 2023 and 2024, do they have to comply?
The answer to that is, when do you apply for your building permit? That's how I believe the entire building codes set. So the energy code is one of a whole, along with the electrical code and the plumbing code and the residential code. And essentially, which code you follow is when do you apply for your building permit, or colloquially, you pull your building permit. So if you pull your building permit on December 30th or 31st, I don't know which days are days of the week, but if you pull your building permit on, let's say, December 31st, 2022, you're under the 2019 code. And if you pull your building permit on January 2nd, 2023, you're under the 2022 code. So that's how all the codes work.
Thank you.
It's and that's set by state law.
Are there any other?
And then the whole retrofits of what I've addressed. These are largely, there are some retrofits for additions and alterations in particular, but largely this is for new buildings.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions? So we'll move on to Standing Subcommittee on Waste Reduction.
I think Sandra had a question. No?
Sandra?
Okay, she's good. Okay, so the Subcommittee on Waste Reduction, the report is there. I wanted to share with you our foodware ordinance graphic and fact sheet. So we put that together with the help of a consultant in the last couple of weeks. So that's included in your packet. Also, just a reminder that we will have our shredding and e-waste event coming on up on October 16th, I think. Is it October 16th? Is that the Saturday?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Saturday 16th.
So October 16th is the shredding and e-waste, and then we are separating it this year from the bulky item drop-off. And so that will be the following weekend, the 23rd, I believe. So, so those two events will be happening in October. We certainly welcome volunteer support for our shredding and e-waste event. Roy has already stepped up and volunteered, so looking forward to seeing other folks there if you are able to make it. Should be lovely weather in October. It's usually really nice, so good day to get out. Also fun to interact with the people that come and drop off their stuff. Anyway, so please consider that as we're going forward here. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we've been meeting quite frequently the last month or two with, feels like a very long time, with Palm Springs Disposal Services, talking through our franchise agreement update, and we're ready to present to council on September 30th the scope of the changes that we're anticipating. And just as an example, the two big things that are going to be required as a result of SB 1383 that PSDS is preparing for, one is the expansion of green waste and food waste collection service from all single-family residential properties and from all multifamily. So originally we were thinking multifamily was exempt from the food waste requirement, but they are not. So we are going to be providing all multifamily residents with food waste collection access under the new requirements. So as you can imagine, that will affect rates. So our plan was to talk through with council the various changes to the scope on September 30th, and then potentially bring forward, unless they have significant changes, bring forward the rates and propose the new rates the following meeting, which would be October 14th, if all goes as planned. So if that happens, then our intent is to publish a public hearing notice to residents so that everybody is aware that those changes, rates are changing. And that public hearing would be in December. So there's a 45-day public notice notification requirement. So anyway, so we're focused a lot on that over the next couple of months and kind of pushing that through. And that is just one of the many requirements of SB 1383 that we are currently working on. I mentioned the purchasing requirement earlier in the meeting. We also have a procurement, I'm sorry, the procurement requirement. We also have a monitoring requirement and reporting requirements and all sorts of things. So anyway, so it's a big deal, and a lot of work is going to be going on into that over the next several months. So anyway, yes, Sandra. Oh, you're on mute.
Could you add me to the Saturday, October 16th volunteer for the, it's actually very fun. It really is. It doesn't sound like it, but it really is fun.
Great, will do.
And Patrick, do you know if you have to, if you don't want a green bin for residential multifamily, you don't have to take one, do you, right?
Yes, you do.
But if you don't have any place to put it, do you have to dispose of the green bin yourself, or how do you get rid of the green bin?
Right. So the way that we're planning to do it is, yeah, so you're an interesting case, right? So I don't know, where do you put your trash and your recycling now?
I have a laundry room with a bike and a thing, and I had to get the smaller bins to be able to fit them both in, but I can't fit anything more in. Right. So, and I don't have any green waste really to recycle more than a half a cubic foot per month.
Right. So our plan for units like yours, and you may not even be able to accommodate this, but we are planning to provide a 2.5 gallon container for people that are space limited. So for folks that are space limited, it's a 2.5 gallon container that you can put your food waste in, and that would be collected manually as opposed to everyone else or other single family residents who would have a cart of a certain size. So
you might want to look at the ruling in the city of San Francisco. I mean, sorry, Palm Springs. It's against the law to have a visible trash can or recycling bin. Yes, you might want to reconsider that.
So that's a good point. We may want to look at that, the wording of that, because everybody's going to have to add a third cart or some sort of container. So I'm sure that there will be an adjustment period in terms of people's ability to shield those from view. So this is a good example of, I think, the kind of conversation and reaction we're going to get more broadly to this ordinance. And unfortunately, in the law does not provide any exceptions for residential customers. It does provide exceptions for commercial customers, and multifamily is considered commercial. So there may be some outs for commercial properties or large multifamily complexes. So anyway, so that it's an interesting law, and it's going to be incredibly challenging to implement. That's what I'm going to say. Okay. All right. So and then the only other point I was going to make with regard to the report is we did meet with the Community Compost Coalition folks and took a look at a site over near behind the animal shelter, and I don't think that's going to be viable based on the feedback we got from our building and planning folks. So we continue to work with them on identifying potential locations for community composting. And that's it.
Thank you, Patrick. Then the next item is World Environment Day.
No news this time.
Thanks, Jen. The Ad Hoc Subcommittee on Walkability and Pedestrian Planning.
So we did meet with the consultant today to talk through the results. They're compiling all the information, and we talked through some of the format stuff. And so we should be getting a report from them next month to be shared publicly and to get some feedback on.
Thank you. The next is Ad Hoc Subcommittee on Bicycle Routes and Cycling.
Oh, give me a second here. Let me find my notes. Oh, so we circulated a survey form that I got from my friends that did the Honolulu bicycle update plan. We took in comments from our bicycle committee members. I made the revisions and incorporated them, and I redistributed it out. And I think the key element here is all of the things that the city of Palm Springs needs to do is really contained in the CVAG transportation, the active transportation plan. And they just sort of dropped the ball a couple of years ago. And I really like to work with CVAG on this. I've tried to reach out and contact the transportation coordinator, Eric Cowles, and I haven't had any luck. So I don't know, do you know him, Patrick? Or because we're basically updating their plan because it's so far along. So before we can, send this out, I'd just kind of like to get some input. So I know that Dennis, Commissioner Council Member Dennis, whose last name I'm blanking on, is what is it? Woods, that's right. He's the CVAG transportation representative. So maybe I'll copy him on this to see if I can get some input. And if not, then it's ready to turn over to Tracy. So hopefully we can send it out pretty soon. And then I'll also point out that we had recently talked about whether the city of Palm Springs want to approve the ordinance to allow bicyclists to treat stop signs as yield signs, which is done in like a number of states on pretty much the whole western side of the country. And that was just approved in the California legislature. So it's waiting governor's approval. So we don't need any more action on that. And I think that'll be a great thing for the bicycle community. And that's it.
Any questions for Jim? Thank you.
So Jim, my only comment is I think that we need to better integrate your conversations and planning efforts into our planning process. So please be thinking about that when we talk about the transportation related stuff in our plan update. So we want to make sure that stuff is all kind of married together in some form or fashion.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, the sustainability plan and the CVAG active transportation plan are both great documents. It'd be nice if we could point to one within the other. And I don't think that we can really do that, or maybe we can, but so much of the planning is there already done for us. So
right.
Well, I got some ideas.
We also talked about developing a new bike master plan. And so I don't know if that's still on the radar, but I think we were going to try to do that along with the update to the circulation element for the general plan update. So
yeah, well, most of the work has already been done by CVAG, so it would be just a matter of updating, and that's kind of the focus behind this survey that we're going to add to it. So hopefully I can get a hold of Eric and he can give me some ideas. But yeah, I'll make sure that that's a part of it. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you, Jim. Ad hoc committee on night sky.
Well, that's me as well. And Alex as well too. I don't know if she's here, but we had a quick meeting, just the two of us, a week ago, and we looked at what we had talked about last meeting, and we kind of agreed that we really can't be commenting on building codes, and I agree with that. And upon rereading it, what all it really says about building codes is that the city really needs to comply with dark skies, because dark skies is actually incorporated into the California Energy Commission building code mandate. So we're just kind of nudging them to follow the rules that they're supposed to follow. So we don't need to do a whole lot of, maybe I'll add some clarification to that. And then there was two more questions, and Alex and I split it up, and one was about lumen levels. And that dark sky ordinance does include lumen levels slightly different than are in the memo there. So I can make a quick reference to that with a total maximum for outdoor lighting, which is the comment I provided to Robert McCann before he left. So I figured that out today. And then I think, Alex, I don't know if you want to, if you're there, if you have any comments on, Alex volunteered to work on some of the education and outreach and enforcement stuff that would be valuable for getting this to work, because we are skeptical about just writing another ordinance, but we really think the opportunity here is to work through education and outreach. So Alex, do you have anything to add?
Sure, I can add just a few comments. I think so we started thinking about what the outreach plan might be, recognizing that it won't be in like full development mode until the policies are solidified, but at least start thinking about that. And we're thinking we will need to rely on like citizen reporting. If your neighbor has lights that are not in accordance, that gets reported and monitored. Also that there are complications with that. So we started trying to think creatively about ways to engage people in that reporting process, like for example, through partnerships. So for example, we know we have advocates for dark skies in like the astrologists who maybe go to events at the Rancho Mirage Library, for example, Mount Palm Springs, I understand, or people who like bats or wildlife. So bringing them on board, maybe like through some fun, engaging events. Come listen to bats on the bat radar, and then on your way home, drive by 5 streets in your neighborhood and report, whose lights are not in accordance, as like kind of a fun example, starting to think of ways that we can just raise awareness that these new policies or mandates are in effect, and that it's upon us to look around and find those who are not complying. So again, it's kind of just in the initial development thinking stage, but that was kind of the direction we were going, in addition to just like information update for homeowners and business owners as well. And I think we also talked about maybe having some of the sustainability scholarship go toward new lighting that is in accordance with the policies. Oh, and we know that there are several other cities we all know that have accomplished the dark sky standard. And so I will be spending some more time researching how they have done their outreach and engagement strategies, and how they've approached the situation in general, and see what we can learn and copy and improve from those other areas.
Thanks, Alex. So I think maybe we'll take another stab at updating Robert's memo. I can add some of my Lumen stuff and a little clarification about the new construction ordinance and the model lighting code. And Alex, I think just putting a little summary of some outreach ideas would probably be enough to make some dent on it. And we also talked about sending it out to PS1 and some of the HOA groups. So
yes.
Anyways, we can work on that going forward. Question, David.
Yeah, I can help you on the energy code stuff because that's my area. But Patrick, that's an area where I can draft stuff, but it really does require input from staff because best as I can tell, the city is using zoning code standards as opposed to the ones in the energy code. So that really does need to be clarified so we understand what the city actually is doing and should be doing. And that may be a good topic for sitting down with you and Flynn and maybe the building folks. And perhaps just doing a cleanup in I think it's generally January, February. The Planning Commission does an annual cleanup, and it may be as simple as deleting the current section of the zoning code and just referring it to just keeping that section and saying, please see energy code. And that way there's no conflict. What it's not clear to me, and that's probably more work, and maybe the committee can look at it, is what's in the zoning code that would be outside of the energy code, and therefore we can maintain those and not being preempted. But generally, anything that you put that's connected to a building, including parking lots and stuff like that, is governed by the energy code. But landscape lighting, which I've already mentioned, isn't. And outdoor lighting for art, which we have a lot of, mostly the cities, that's also an area where the city can regulate. But anyway, Jim, if you do a draft, I'm happy to tweak it for you. And because I've already sent some materials to Rob.
Okay, and David, I probably would ask you too a little bit. It seems to me the consensus is the maximum lumen per fixture is 525, but how many fixtures can you have? You drive down South Palm and there's 5 uplights on a tree, and the Energy Commission had the same problem with shower heads. When they limited shower heads to 2 gallons, some people built showers with 4 shower heads. So it's a little bit of a parallel there. It's sort of one of the things they recommend is a lighting budget per acre or per square foot, but it starts getting complicated fast. So I hate to do that, but maybe we can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that's in the code. I'd have to take a look because the 2022 code is tightening some of the standards, but basically there is a budget for that. So if it's not in the current code, just wait another, 15 months and it becomes part of city law. So we don't need
Right.
that.
But translating that to landscaping only, so I just will use.
Yeah, translating landscaping only is a challenge.
I'd like to keep it simple.
Yeah, but if it's sort of attached to the building,
Yeah,
for parking
we're not
lots and
touching
things like that. Yeah, that's covered by the energy code.
Right.
But you could use the standards, and I can send those to you to see. I can send you the 2022 code standards, and you can see if you can, make them work for landscaping.
Okay, okay, well, we can talk about it offline. Thank you.
Okay, just ping me and I'll work with you on that.
Okay. I can't hear anything. Are you talking, Roy?
Roy, you're muted.
I'm sorry. I usually keep myself unmuted in this meeting. For Jim and Alex, do you think you'll have something on the updated memo for the next meeting? And if so, we'll put you on the agenda under old business. And if you don't know right now, just let me and Patrick know in a week or a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I can make some simple edits on my side, Alex.
Yeah, I can add some text too. Mhm.
So we'll plan on having that under old business. Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is ad hoc subcommittee on strategic planning and general plan update. I think we've probably covered everything there, so we can move on to the next one, which is water conservation.
More. This morning, CWA board meeting, I provide an update on the airport demonstration garden from Patrick's staff report. Didn't have the latest information that you just presented, Patrick, but just let them know that we're working on that. DWA approved a rate increase effective January 1, 2022. This is the last step in a 5-year rate plan that was approved under the Prop 218 procedure in 2017, but DWA had suspended the scheduled July 2020 and 2021 increases because of COVID. The board also approved applying for more than $300,000 in funding to provide direct payment to customers' water accounts for arrearages resulting from COVID-19. Program is administered by the State Water Board with $985 million in federal funding authorized by the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. Overall water use was down 13% and 15% in August of 2021 compared with the same months in the 2013 baseline year and 11% over the last 12 months. Water use was down 4% in August compared with last year. And that's benchmarked under the governor's voluntary target of a 15% reduction. July water use compared with last year is being reevaluated. There's a very lengthy article that Janet Wilson has already posted in the Desert Sun. It will probably be in tomorrow's print edition, so you can read more about that there. But once again, we still have a lot of work to do on water conservation, working with the DWA and then setting an example for the city.
Thank you. The next item is wellness. Carl?
Hi, Chair Clark actually spoke with former Mayor Pro Tem Coors regarding this non-smoking ordinance. We have the documents to proceed. There's just one sort of issue that they can go forward with as the housing element, whether or not to include that or not. And what I mean by that is, A, will smoking be prohibited in any multi-dwelling unit? Or B, as one way it could be bifurcated, that it's only from a date certain, let's say January 1, 2022, from that date going forward in multi-dwelling units, they would be smoke-free, or they could just retroactively say on January 1, all units in every place in the city would be smoke-free. But that's something that we will leave up to council to decide.
That's one issue, though, when we discussed it the last time in the commission, I think most of the majority felt that we should not ban smoking in multifamily units. So we wanted to get a sense from the commissioners as to where you stand now on that. And we, the mayor and Councilmember Coors would like us to proceed with finalizing an ordinance and presenting it. Probably won't be this year, but we need to be working on that. And so we may want to, within the next meeting or two, have an updated draft on the ordinance. If there's any thought about how to handle the multifamily units. If there's any preference on banning or not banning. And actually, the mayor and Councilmember Coors did say they wanted to ban smoking in multifamily units. They were for that.
With the multifamily units banning, I mean, I'm opposed to smoking, and I think that would be great. But on the other hand, I think realistically in rentals and multifamily units, I think the biggest problem is, even if you legislate it, the nature of many, but to generalize smokers is they're going to smoke no matter what. I see it where I live. It's a smoke-free environment. They just smoke in their apartments. They ignore it. That's the nature of many smokers. They don't care, and they're going to smoke anyway. So I think it's very difficult to impose that. I think it would be great, and I know some places, that they can do it successfully, but I just don't know.
In most of the major cities, for instance, Santa Monica, Pasadena, it is banned, it's prohibited, and just period. Although Councilmember Friedman doesn't like the private right of action, but I think we should open it up like the Texas abortion law and let anyone get a $10,000 reward for calling in your neighbor.
Well, I think it might be a good place where you have like smokers club. Why not have, or dwellings where they're pet friendly? Why not have smoking places where, like, everybody in this apartment building, it's a smokers apartment building, and let them smoke there freely. They have their rights, but non-smokers and children or people with, asthma and that shouldn't have to be sharing air, and paying the same rent and being exposed to, potential disease and toxins. So I go for like a smoking building.
That's the argument. So Chair Clark, how do you suggest we proceed?
Why don't we bring back the latest ordinance at the meeting in October?
Okay.
And right now that ordinance does ban smoking in multifamily units.
Not as written, so please check that.
Yeah, I sent them the new one this week.
And that's one place where this conversation started between Carl and me. That has to be updated. So why don't we plan on doing that, and then in the meantime, we should start working on the staff report. I think ultimately that has to come from Patrick, but I think we can make some input to that too.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just ask, when you met with the mayor and Councilmember Coors, did they suggest or request to do any sort of town hall like they had requested before?
No, they didn't.
Okay.
Finally is Desert Community Energy.
Okay, me again, hopefully last time. DC board meets next Monday, and agenda will be posted tomorrow or Thursday. The Community Advisory Committee will meet on September 30th, and I'll report back on the meetings at the October 5 Solar Green Building Committee meeting. At its August 16 meeting, the DC board reappointed the existing CAC members, which include myself and Commissioner Baker, for additional 2-year terms, and appointed Maria Cruz Osorio, a resident of Council District 1, recommended by Council Member Gardner, to fill a vacancy on the CAC, also for a 2-year term. And there's still a vacancy from Council District 4, so I'll follow up with Mayor Holstedge for a recommendation. I'm working with DC staff on an RFP for a distributed energy resources consultant who advised DC on establishing programs for installation of solar and battery storage systems at commercial buildings and critical government and health facilities to increase local resilience and reliability. And Patrick, this work could be integrated into the city's climate adaptation efforts, because one of the key focuses will be emergency facilities and getting solar and storage as a backup, as opposed to diesel generators. So that's a good, that would be a good area to integrate. And I've also asked, and this goes to the point that Commissioner Barrett has raised, I've asked DC staff to look into funding for weatherization programs for low and moderate income households to combat extreme heat. As issues that are mentioned in the ProPublica article that Commissioner Evans had circulated also apply in Palm Springs. So everything that you read in that article, thank you, Commissioner Evans, we have that here. Once again, sort of the challenge of which code applies, and it may be better for DCE to work with the IOUs, Edison and the gas company, and they have funding allocated from the CPUC, and that funding bucket has been increased. And at least according to the announcement yesterday from the feds, they're also approving additional funding so that the low-income weatherization program, which mostly had been focused on extreme cold in the Northeast, also will help for insulation for heat. So that may be an area that we could work with DC to see what programs are, and that would not be tied to Title 24. So that could potentially benefit the manufactured home sector. So I am thinking about that. Environmental justice is something that I'll be bringing up at the CAC, and that's probably best to deal with at the DC level than the city level, because they have better access to the funding sources.
Thank you, David. So the final item on the agenda is commissioner comments and upcoming agenda. So what we'll do is virtually go around the table and ask if anybody has any additional comments or requests or suggestions for future agenda items. So David, start.
Big further, thank you.
Okay, Carl.
Just the smoking ordinance.
Don.
Nothing at the moment.
Thank you. Randy.
Nothing currently.
Jim.
Not for me.
Jennifer.
Not right now.
Sandra.
Sorry. Shade options, with the understanding that drought and the maintenance of the trees and the upkeep and all of that. But there's places in the world where there's incredible, where they've done like streets of parasols, you know, and all interesting kinds of architectural stretchings and canvases. So the shade is so important, and anybody who is walking around in Palm Springs knows that after a few minutes. But if we can create shade without trees, or putting trees in, you know, more crucial areas, I think we've got a good mix there.
Sandra, the only thing I'd say is the wind is a problem with shade structures that are not trees, especially on the north end of town.
Yes, indeed, we do have wind, especially there, yes.
Although I've noticed the new shade structures like in Ruth Hardy Park, they look pretty rugged.
Good point, yeah.
Thank you, Sandra. Greg? Greg?
I think he dropped.
Okay. Alex?
Nothing from me. Thank you.
And Jake is not here. Okay, so that concludes our meeting. It was a very productive meeting. Our next meeting will be held on Tuesday, October 19th, 2021 at 5:30 p.m. I assume it will still be on Zoom. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Carl, second.
Second.
Thank you, Don. And I think we all will be in favor.
Aye.
The meeting is now adjourned, 7:31. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Thank you, everybody. Very interesting.
Thank you, Andreas.
Yeah, thanks.